And today's video is we're going to talk a little bit about lifts and leveling kits and stuff like that on trucks like this. First and foremost, come in here. This particular customer has a lift kit on his truck. Most commonly, lift kits will come with lift blocks in the rear because it is pretty cheap to do that. But in this particular case, it looks as though the customer stacked blocks. This is a giant no-no in our shop. We never let this stuff happen at our shop. So this needs to be something that we talk to the customer about before we put his airbag kit on and or do anything else suspension related with this truck. We took a tape measure here and I believe, let me just have it real quick, Jason. Okay, the factory block is this one down here. It should be about 1 7/8 to 2 inches. Depends on if it's tapered or not. It's literally 1 7/8, okay? This is 1 7/8 block, and it's gonna be 1 7/8 on this side and on that side. If this was a short wheelbase truck, like an extended cab short bed, a regular cab long bed, or an excursion, it would be a tapered block, and it's to change the pinion angle. Anyway, somebody has now stacked on a 3 3/16 block on top of that. We don't like that because these blocks, as you can see, can shift. They can get spit out. They can break the little nipple that holds them in place. It's just not a good idea. Never, ever, ever, ever do I condone blocks that are stacked. So technically, when we're dealing with this particular truck, before we do the lifts, airbags, we want to talk to the customer about what their rear block situation is. In the totality here, we have 5 total inches. So if we're going to go back in with a single block and we want to reuse this length of U-bolt, which obviously is way longer than it needs to be because the truck's missing overloads right now. There are overloads that belong on top of this. If we want to go back in and be the exact same ride height and everything like that, we would go back in with 5-inch non-tapered blocks, okay? Now technically, when we get new U-bolts made, if there is not a set of overloads that are supposed to be on this truck, which I think should be there, especially if we're putting airbags on the truck, we should be sourcing some overloads. We have tons of them laying around. These U-bolts are long enough to accommodate those overloads. Those overloads consist of a small spacer, another leaf spring, and then this same plate on top. Any which way, when we go back through like this particular job, we need to find out how much this truck is lifted. Overloads don't add to the lift, so that has nothing to do with it. This rear of this truck is lifted approximately 2 inches. Most leveling kits, 2 and 3 inch leveling kits, do not do anything with the rear. The only time most leveling kits on these Fords do anything with the rear is when they're going in excess of 4 inch on the front. Typically a 4 to 6 inch kit in the front is going to give you a 2, 3, or 4 inch block in the rear. Now typically if you do like a 3 or 4 inch lift in the front, you're supposed to just use this single block in the rear by itself to achieve the leveled look. If you want it to still be raked out, that's when you would add in that second block unless you're smarter, and then you would just put a 5-inch block in. So I'm gonna cut this video short. This is just gonna be for the rear portion of the lift. That way we'll do another video that's gonna be about the front. But for the rear, I did cover taper block versus non-tapered block, having 1 block versus having 2 blocks, and then my personal preference is that instead of putting blocks in the back, I much prefer to compensate by putting in lift springs in the back. Smaller blocks, longer lift springs, or taller lift springs are always the better option. But I do want to caution you on one thing. One thing that you must be aware of. Come around here. From the factory, there's not a lot of room here. So when you put a 2-inch lift spring in, you will get at least 1 inch closer here. When you put a 4-inch lift spring here, you will get almost like touching this, if not, you will end up touching this. So just be mindful that if you put big lift springs in the rear, that your exhaust might be impacted. For me, I would rather the safety of not having dual blocks as well as the lack of axle wrap that you will get from having lift springs instead of stack blocks and the vibrations that you get on takeoff from having stack blocks. I would take that any day and then having to modify this exhaust over what we have right here in the back of this truck. Now, with that being said, I will cover one more thing. Let's talk about shocks, because I remember we had a previous, problem with that previously. You should always measure the working length of these shocks by removing the shocks and putting the weight of the vehicle on the leaf springs itself. And you would get a measurement of whatever that is from the center of this bolt to the center of the bolt up top. Then you would find a shock that would have a working range that would basically give you the ability to stuff the suspension or extend the suspension. A way that you could figure out the extended length would be to raise the vehicle on a 2-post lift and then take that same measurement again. And then you could do the same thing by putting a lot of weight on the trailer or, whatever. You could find the compressed length, or you could just kind of take a guess at it. If your uncompressed weight of whatever the length is, let's just say it's like 25 inches, and then your fully extended length is 30 inches, one could say that a 10-inch total travel, 5 inches on either side, would be sufficient. More than likely, you will be able to go find a shock that will be in excess of that in both directions, and it will work. So that's how you would find the correct size shocks if it's not already in a kit, already ready to go. So let's stop the video there and I'll start talking about the front end stuff.